I'm Cheryl Chumley. This is Bold and Blunt, giving you a Christian conservative view of news, politics, culture, and events. Gol Kalev, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It's great to have you from Israel again.
Great to be here.
So let's open by talking about Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Israel, calling for a ceasefire, calling for Israel to have a clear exit strategy from Gaza. How is he being received?
I think he's meeting with the Prime Minister now as we speak in Tel Aviv in the military headquarters. And of course, it is a testament to the great relationship that Israel has with the United States. We have a lot, the Americans are our partners, and we're very blessed by that. And I'm sure they're talking about a lot of things at the various arenas obviously in Gaza, certainly in Lebanon and Yemen and in other fronts. Yes, there's also disagreements, primarily about the morning after. That's part of the discussions, and that's part of the nature of things, to have disagreements about exactly how the war continues and what happens after the war.
That's a very diplomatic way to put it, because there are a lot of disagreements, I guess, as you might say. On Friday, there were reports that 3 Hamas hostages were killed mistakenly by the IDF, which led European leaders to call or actually double down on a ceasefire. So I'm curious, when you look from a larger viewpoint of what's taking place with this war, how it impacts Muslims in Europe, how it impacts the global order. Can you speak at length to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to separate. First of all, anybody taking advantage cynically of our tragedy where 3 hostages were mistakenly killed by the IDF, mistaking them for terrorists, anybody taking advantage of that to try to make us end our defensive operation against Hamas, it's pure evil. There's no other words for that. Now, on the discussion of whether there should be a ceasefire or not, we can talk about that. But look, as we spoke a few weeks ago, ceasefire means one thing, and it means that there's going to be more October 7th. There's going to be more October 7th, and then Israel will need to retaliate against Hamas in Gaza, and then there's going to be more humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but as we spoke last time, the people in the UN and all those people calling for a ceasefire have something to do with that, because they don't let Israel get rid of Hamas, which in a sense is occupying Gaza. So I think the discussion of we in Israel want to believe that the world will understand and let us defend ourselves as we have a right to, and our Prime Minister and Defense Minister made it clear that we're going to do that one way or another. As for your question about the Muslims
yes.
in Europe, look, I mean, we're seeing all those pro-Hamas demonstrations or pro-Palestinian demonstrations in Europe, and they have 2 big banners, 2 big signs at the forefront of those demonstrations. One is "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," essentially calling for the genocide of Jews here. But the second is "Globalize the Intifada." They make it no secret that they want to bring this to Europe, maybe to the United States. And I would say that has 2 obvious implications. One is the safety and security of the people in Europe. On the one hand, there are still people in France who are still recovering from the riots that they had a few months ago, where has some analogies to what's to what's been happening here. You had people storming French towns and villages. I think burning over 5,000 cars, creating damage to over 1,000 buildings. And that was just in the context of, without weapons, without riots. But then October 7th happened, and a lot of people in Europe are worried, rightfully so, that some radical Muslim forces in Europe might want to do the same. And they have the capabilities to do the same or something similar. And let us not forget, as the UN Secretary General Guterres reminded us, those, to lend his words, those riots in France did not happen in a vacuum. Muslims in France feels oppressed, feels that the rights are being taken, they have a lot of grievances against Europeans. So people can just add up and do the math and say, "Oh my God, this is coming here." I would say it more simply. The banner of "Globalize the Intifada" next to the banner of "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" people say, well, what's going to come next? We can add 1 and 1 and says, is it going to be from the Atlantic to the Black Sea? Eurostan will be free. So people are looking at this and avoid. And that's why a lot of Europeans, openly or unopenly, are expecting us to deliver a decisive blow to Hamas, to resist all those calls and lectures about ceasefires, because our war, our ability to defeat the jihadists here prevents the war from coming to Europe and the United States. So that's on the one level of a security level, how this war can affect Europe. But there's a more strategic, I think, discussion here, because Europe has a Muslim question. There's a conflict in Europe between, if you want to be simplistically, between the old style, the Europeans, white Europeans, formerly Christian Europeans, and the Muslims who've been living there sometimes for a number of generations and have a life there. And there is a conflict. And the anti-Zionist forces that have erupted in Europe over the last 2 months have triggered that. In the Jerusalem Post, we're doing a special magazine this coming Friday about the rise of anti-Zionism and what does it mean. And in my article, I argue that anti-Zionism is a national security threat to the United States and Europe. It's a global threat, not just the most dominant version of anti-Semitism today. Because let's take Spain, for example. In Spain, you had all those criticism from the Spanish Prime Minister about Israel. But Spaniards have been living for centuries under the idea of the Reconquista. That they're there because in the late 1500s, in the 15th century, the Ferdinand and Isabella reconquered Spain. But if you believe in the narrative of Spain, of this being a reconquista as opposed to a conquista, meaning that there's some loose connection between the people who conquered Spain and the people that were there 1,000 years ago, then you have to give legitimacy to Zionism, which is a much more historically credible story about a nation coming back. So in a strange way, anti-Zionism, almost, you cannot be an anti-Zionist if you're not an anti-Spaniard. So the popularity and the mainstreaming of anti-Zionism and Israel bashing forces by the media and the UN and others have put on the table the Spanish question as they've done the European question. So there's other, it brings a lot of things that we didn't even think were possible. End of universities, at the universities that are needed, and other issues that the anti-Zionism movement ushers into the global discussion.
There's a lot to think about there. That's fascinating, and I do look forward to reading your piece because it seems important to read through. I just have 2 other questions for you, real quick, because I know our time is tight. But when you're in Israel and the pressure is coming from all areas of the world to ceasefire, to stand down, and to give up, as you put it, this defensive operation of Israel, does the tone and tenor, does the spirit of the Jewish people change? Are there Jewish people now who are saying maybe we should listen to the global bureaucrats pressing for a ceasefire for our own safety, for our own security? Or does it stand strong?
Asking Israel to have a ceasefire is like asking the Allies invading Europe in World War II to have a ceasefire and not defeat the German and basically prolonging the Holocaust. That basically would mean, the idea that 6 million were not enough. And asking us for a ceasefire today basically means that 1,400 people dying in one day from the Hamas attacks were not enough. So no, we are resolved, we are united in the idea that we must defend ourselves. There are, of course, internal disagreements about what's the best way to do it, how we balance that with that objective of the war of obliterating Hamas, with the other objective of the war of returning our hostages. So there are disagreements about those issues, but there's no disagreements about our resolve and our right, absolute right, to defend ourselves, to defend our homes against this modern day Nazis.
Just one other question that I've been curious about for a while. Christians, I'm a Christian. My friends are, I have a lot of Christian friends. And what is taught in the Christian faith is that one of the markers of end times is when the world's governments rise up against Israel. And I just wonder, is that something that the Jewish people are aware of in terms of Christian prophecy? Is that something that you pay attention to, that you discuss in Israel, or is that something that you don't even think about or consider?
It depends who. I mean, there's a lot of actually rabbis that have dialogue with Christian theologians and priests, yes. And actually, I was just a few hours ago in a coffee shop in the Old City, and next to me there was a discussion of a Christian group talking about something that was similar along these lines, and so there are just discussions that are mostly in the Christian world. But I think what we are focused right now is our survival. We are under a dual assault. We're under a physical assault from Hamas and Hezbollah in the north, and we're under ideological assault from the Israel bashers and anti-Zionists in the media, in the BBC, in the UN, and elsewhere. So we're focused right now on defending ourselves from those dual assault, the ideological assault and the physical assault, and that's what we're focused on. And we're grateful. I just want to make clear, we are, I think every Israelis are grateful for the support we're getting from Christians, from evangelicals, from everybody, who supports us in the United States and elsewhere.
Very good. Gol Kalev, thank you so much again, and stay safe in Israel.
And Merry Christmas if we don't speak before
thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. All the best.